You're watching the Everything Network. The Dirty Dozen MC was established by 12 founding members in 1964. While some sources erroneously claim that the Dirty Dozen were named after the 1967 film of the same name, the club was in fact formed prior to the release of the film. The club's insignia consisted of a pair of dice with the sixes facing out and cobwebs trailing off the sides. The Dirty Dozen's membership peaked at approximately 120, with at least 6 chapters located in Phoenix, Mesa, Tucson, Cave Creek, and Flagstaff, as well as a Nomads chapter. The club's leadership consisted of a state president who was deputized by a state vice president, or warlord. Among the Dirty Dozen's most prominent traditions was the annual Florence Prison Run, which began in the early 1970s. Held each February, the drive-by salute to those incarcerated at Florence State Prison has drawn thousands of motorcycle enthusiasts yearly. The Dirty Dozen became the largest and most violent motorcycle gang in Arizona and would not allow other outlaw biker clubs to operate in the state without their permission. An increase in the club's membership size came in turn with a series of violent attacks on law enforcement personnel, rival gang members, and local citizens. Incidents included the attempted murder of a police officer, assaults on bar patrons, and bomb and gun attacks on businesses and residences. Members were also found in possession of large caches of weapons. The club also became associated with mafia figures in Phoenix in relation to massage parlors and strong-arm violence. A series of shootings and fights broke out between members of the Dirty Dozen and the rival Seekers MC after 2 Seekers bikers were wounded by shots fired by unknown assailants on Interstate 10 north of Tucson on February 26, 1976. The feud resulted in its first fatality on March 29, 1976, when Bruce Ritter was shot dead by a sniper while he was visiting the southeast Tucson residence of his brother-in-law, a Dirty Dozen member. The killing of Ritter took place while representatives of both clubs were meeting to discuss bringing an end to the escalating conflict. Expanded discussions took place the following day when 2 members each of the Dirty Dozen, the Seekers, the Devil's Disciples, the Sons of Odin, and the Soul Sinners, met with authorities at the Pima County Sheriff's Department headquarters and agreed to exercise control of their brothers so that these incidents stop. According to law enforcement officials, the feud was in relation to territorial control of riding and drinking areas among the estimated 250 outlaw bikers in the Tucson area. In 1979, the Dirty Dozen established a clubhouse in Claypool. Outnumbering the local police, the club had virtual impunity to commit crime in the town, and members became known for harassing and assaulting residents of the area. The Dirty Dozen came into conflict the following year with the Bad Company MC, a club from New Mexico who were attempting to form a chapter in nearby Globe, resulting in 2 local Bad Company members, David Howell and Laird Criley, being badly beaten and ordered to disband. Howell and Criley persisted in wearing their club's colors in the area, however, and they were summoned to a meeting with Dirty Dozen member Robert Chico Mora, who had been dispatched from Tucson at a Globe Roadhouse. Howell and Criley were both shot dead by Mora, who claimed he was ambushed by the pair in the bar's bathroom. 11 Dirty Dozen bikers from the Phoenix area, including club president Gary "Greasy" Stacy, were subsequently arrested in connection with the killings by a contingent of local and state police. Mora eventually surrendered to the Gila County Sheriff's Office and was charged with first-degree murder. He ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 5 years in prison in December 1980. Several club members in Phoenix were also convicted of attempting to peddle $250,000 worth of counterfeit currency in order to raise $40,000 for Mora's defense fund. They were each sentenced to 6 months imprisonment and 3 years probation. A war broke out over control of prostitution rackets in Tucson between the local Dirty Dozen chapter and the Mongols chapter in the city, which was formed in May 1982. Subsequently, the Mongols allied themselves with the Outlaws, who had established a presence in Tucson after the club's former Florida president, James "Big Jim" Nolan, moved to the city. The Dirty Dozen, in turn, formed an alliance with the Hells Angels, who became the club's main supplier of methamphetamine. Several senior Dirty Dozen members were subsequently convicted of methamphetamine trafficking. In 1983, 44-year-old electrician John Turner was shot and killed by an unidentified individual when he attempted to use his pickup truck to run over a row of over 20 motorcycles belonging to Dirty Dozen members outside Gary's Lounge, a North Phoenix bar. Turner had earlier been ejected from the bar by patrons after he asked the girlfriend of a biker to dance. On August 12, 1983, Dirty Dozen member John Leslie "Puff" Huey kidnapped the 19-year-old girlfriend of another club member, Eddie Barra, from her trailer home in Tucson and took her to his Phoenix residence, where he held her captive for 7 days, raped and tortured her. He was sentenced to a minimum of 166 years in prison in June 1984 after being convicted on 1 count of kidnapping and 9 counts of sexual assault. On August 30, 1984, a case in which Huey was charged with 6 counts of sexual conduct with a minor, 2 counts of child molesting and 1 count of child prostitution ended in a mistrial due to a hung jury. He was accused of molesting and prostituting the 13-year-old sister of his girlfriend, Pamela Jean McQuillan, between December 1982 and February 1983, after McQuillan had gifted the girl to Huey as a Christmas present. McQuillan was convicted of 3 counts of sexual conduct with a minor, 2 counts of child prostitution, and 1 count of child molestation on August 14, 1984, and she was sentenced to 42 years imprisonment on October 5, 1984. Standing trial for a second time, Huey was convicted in April 1985 of 4 counts of sexually assaulting a minor and 2 counts of child molesting. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of child prostitution. On June 14, 1985, he was sentenced to a 168-year prison term. Dirty Dozen president Chris "Porker" Sexton Borkham was among at least 15 people arrested and charged with narcotics offenses on January 24, 1984, following a 19-month undercover investigation into a Phoenix-based drug distribution network allegedly consisting of members of the Dirty Dozen as well as independent bikers. According to authorities, the drug ring also operated in California, Colorado, Kansas, and South Dakota, and was connected to the mafia. As part of the investigation, police served 52 search warrants between June 1982 and February 1983, seizing over $150,000 worth of various narcotics, 150 guns, and 1,500 rounds of ammunition. One Dirty Dozen member, Charlie Prest, was allegedly handcuffed and beaten by off-duty police officers working as security at a David Allan Coe concert in Tempe on December 2, 1984, and 2 others claimed they were maced when they attempted to intercede. All 3 were then jailed. The police officers testified that they had acted with reasonable force and that the bikers had precipitated the violence. On April 30, 1985, Prest was convicted of disorderly conduct at Phoenix City Court. A 5-month joint drug investigation by the Arizona Department of Public Safety and Federal Bureau of Investigation resulted in 44 Dirty Dozen members and associates being arrested on federal charges of conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine on February 5, 1985. According to the indictments, the Dirty Dozen had conspired to take control of the methamphetamine trade in Arizona and carried out counterintelligence operations against rival motorcycle gangs and law enforcement personnel. Numerous people, including several senior club members, were convicted and imprisoned as a result of the investigation. In 1990, the Dirty Dozen became involved in a conflict with the Vagos after the California-based club expanded into Arizona, establishing a chapter in Phoenix. The Vagos were ultimately vanquished from the city after a number of shootings and bombings, including a pipe bomb attack on the residence of Arizona Don Halterman, the president of the Vagos of Phoenix chapter. The Dirty Dozen, Vagos War, resulted in a number of bystanders becoming casualties. On September 23, 1992, a 14-month investigation by a task force consisting of the DPS Organized Crime Division, the FBI, the ATF, and the Phoenix and Mesa police departments culminated with over 400 law enforcement officers serving 68 search warrants on the residences of Dirty Dozen members in Maricopa, Pima, Yavapai, and Pinal counties. 20 ounces of marijuana, 5 ounces of methamphetamine, 1/2 ounce of cocaine, a trace of LSD, 38 Harley-Davidson motorcycles and 11 other vehicles, over 1,200 guns, knives, and other weapons, and approximately $18,000 in cash were seized as potential evidence. A former club member, Robert Gonzalez, was a prime informant in the case. More than 40 people were indicted on charges including conspiracy to distribute drugs, drug possession, weapons violations, and fraud, as a result of the evidence gathered after a state grand jury issued a 145-count indictment in January 1993. Like the earlier 1985 operation against the Dirty Dozen, the raids of 1992 weakened the club, but did not lead to its disbanding as intended. The Dirty Dozen came to the attention of Sonny Barger, the reputed national leader of the Hells Angels, while he was serving a 4-year sentence for conspiracy at FCI Phoenix in Arizona between 1989 and 1992. In July 1996, the Hells Angels Oakland, California chapter voted in favor of expanding their club into Arizona by amalgamating the Dirty Dozen, and the majority of the Dirty Dozen's membership voted to patch over to join the Hells Angels. Robert Mora, the Dirty Dozen's Tucson chapter president, was credited with being responsible for the merger due to his incessant campaigning as he sought a larger network of bikers to do business with. Motions to merge the Dirty Dozen with the Angels had been unsuccessful in previous years. The amalgamation was also mutually beneficial for the Hells Angels, as it allowed the club to expand into a state with lax motorcycle helmet restrictions and a terrain ideal for motorcycle riding. Law enforcement authorities have also alleged that Arizona's close proximity to Mexico has allowed the Angels to trade in firearms and methamphetamine with near impunity. During the Dirty Dozen's 14-month probationary period, numerous members, including at least one former police officer, were expelled as they were deemed unworthy of becoming Hells Angels. Those who voted against the patch over were forced to retire from the outlaw biker subculture and ordered never to wear the Dirty Dozen's colors again. The merger between the Dirty Dozen and the Hells Angels was consecrated during a meeting of members from both clubs at the Oakland chapter clubhouse in October 1997. In 1998, Sonny Barger left his longtime Oakland chapter to join the Cave Creek chapter. His role within the Arizona Hells Angels was reportedly an advisory position, as he did not hold officer status, and he rarely attended rallies or public events. Barger was also a member of the Yavapai County chapter before he returned to Oakland in 2016. You're watching the Everything Network. The Sons of Silence are classified as an outlaw motorcycle gang by the United States Department of Justice and have traditionally been considered part of the Big Five biker gangs, along with the Bandidos, the Hells Angels, the Outlaws, and the Pagans. The club has since been surpassed in membership size by the Mongols, however. The Sons of Silence are involved in numerous criminal activities, including murder, assault, drug trafficking, intimidation, extortion, prostitution operations, money laundering, weapons trafficking, and motorcycle parts theft. The club is allied with the Hells Angels and the Iron Horsemen, and is a rival of the Outlaws. Colorado. They are among the most active motorcycle club in Colorado. The club maintains a number of chapters in the state, including in Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Aurora, Grand Junction, and 2 in Denver. The Sons of Silence are involved in the distribution of methamphetamine at wholesale and retail levels in Colorado, obtaining the drug from Mexican drug cartels, and also producing it themselves in Weld County. The Coloradan chapters of the club also transport and distribute methamphetamine to other states, including North Dakota. 6 members, Scott Benigsdorf, John Barnard, Bobby Mann, Art Miller, Mark Wager, and National President Bruce Richardson, were charged with assault with a deadly weapon and jailed for their involvement in a bar brawl in Colorado Springs on March 5, 1972. The brawl involved a total of 22 participants and was the result of a power struggle between the Sons of Silence and 2 other motorcycle clubs, the Dead Men, and a group known as Philtown. Some of the Sons of Silence members arrested were involved in an alleged conspiracy to kill police and kidnap the children of police officers earlier that year. Sons of Silence member Brian Carl Young was convicted of criminally negligent homicide in the death of a 16-year-old girl who was killed when Young accidentally discharged a .22 caliber Ruger rifle that he had been making alterations to at the Sons of Silence clubhouse in Commerce City on October 3, 1982. 6 members of the Sons of Silence, Jack E. Hauser Jr., James Dean Jimmy Jahnke, Gerald W. Richardson, Larry Lee Richardson, Dennis Raymond Swingler, and Ralph W. Vicori, were convicted of conspiracy to manufacture and distribute methamphetamine after Hauser, Jahnke, Swingler, and Vicori were arrested on I-80 in Wyoming while transporting 36 pounds of the drug, as well as a mobile drug lab obtained from Cecilia Martinez, wife of the imprisoned Bar Hoppers Motorcycle Club president Glenn Gary, in Modesto, California, on January 23, 1983, to Denver. The convictions followed an FBI investigation into the Colorado Sons of Silence, which commenced in September 1981 and was aided by FBI informant Beth Fisher, the divorced wife of club member Robert Fisher. A Sons of Silence member was charged with the murder of a member of the Diablos Lobos gang who was killed in an Aurora bar amidst a turf war involving the groups in 1983. Another bar fight involving the Sons of Silence and the Invaders motorcycle gang at a Denver tavern resulted in a series of sporadic shootings. Sons of Silence biker Ron Bemis was shot to death in his driveway by Invaders member Alfred H. Crazy Al Mills, who was subsequently convicted of murder. Sons of Silence member Paul Robert P.K. Klein was shot and killed by Eugene Herbert Bayliss at Jim and I's Star Bar in Colorado Springs, where Klein was the bar manager, on April 17, 1993. Bar patron Stephen Fairfax was also killed, and 5 others were wounded. Bayliss, who was armed with an AK-47 assault rifle and 4 hand grenades, only stopped his shooting spree after he was shot and wounded by a police officer. Bayliss claimed that Klein had shot him with a pellet gun earlier that day, and that he had gone to the bar to detain him until police had arrived. He was acquitted of murder and other charges in 1995, after his attorneys argued that he fired in self-defense. Bayliss would later be sentenced to 3 years in prison on federal weapons charges, and was killed in a shootout with Bureau of Land Management, BLM, officers in May 2018. Sons of Silence president Leonard Ray Shipley was arrested by Colorado Springs police following an undercover operation in August 1993. Shipley was convicted in April 1995 of distribution and possession of methamphetamine. possession of a grenade simulator, and being a special offender for having both a deadly weapon and illegal drugs, and he was later sentenced to 24 years in prison. On October 9, 1999, 37 Sons of Silence members were arrested on drug trafficking and illegal weapons charges after one of Colorado's largest federal undercover operations. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, ATF, raided a number of homes and properties in Colorado Springs, Commerce City, and Fort Collins, and seized 20 pounds of methamphetamine, 35 guns, 4 hand grenades, 2 suppressors, cash, and motorcycles. The investigation began in 1997 and involved 2 undercover agents infiltrating the club. Among those arrested were the club's national president, Leonard Reed, and vice president, Stephen Cresson. The club was featured in a 2009 episode of Gangland, which included interviews with one of the undercover agents who infiltrated the club. 2 men, Stanley B. Glade and Justin W. Jeske, were arrested after assaulting and robbing a Sons of Silence member at his home in Longmont on April 17, 2012. Glade and Jeske are allegedly former club members who were expelled. The Sons of Silence, along with the Diablos, are the primary wholesalers of methamphetamine in Vigo County, transporting the drug into the area via the southwestern United States. The first Sons of Silence chapter in Indiana was formed in the 1970s by Michael "Righteous Mike" Ramsey, a former member of the Outlaws who left that club in 1974 amid internal dissension and was granted permission by Sons of Silence founder Bruce "The Dude" Richardson to establish an SOSMC chapter in Indianapolis. Ramsey went on to serve as national president of the Sons of Silence before retiring from the club. He died of a heart attack at the age of 50 on March 10, 1991. The Sons of Silence's expansion into Indianapolis prompted friction with the Outlaws and, after a period of infrequent fighting in which members of the rival clubs would try to physically take the colors from opposing bikers, a war erupted following the July 1978 near-fatal stabbing of Outlaws member Dale "Dummy" Lark during a bar fight on the city's west side. The conflict between the Sons of Silence and the Outlaws in Indianapolis in the late 1970s and early 1980s resulted in a number of murders, including those of 2 girlfriends of SOSMC members. On March 5, 1980, 2 gunmen opened fire with automatic rifles on the Outlaws clubhouse at 1210 East Ohio Street, killing Outlaws National Vice President Thomas Walter Satan Reeves. Hours before the shooting, members of the Sons of Silence and the Outlaws drank together at a bar on the east side of Indianapolis. Sons of Silence bikers were then marched from the Outlaws clubhouse at gunpoint after entering the premises. Sons of Silence Indianapolis chapter vice president Stephen Wayne Crescent Wrench Cresson was the alleged killer of Reeves, using an AK-47 assault rifle. On October 4, 1980, Lisa J. Reimer, the girlfriend of a Sons of Silence member, was shot in the back of the head and killed during a shootout on an entry ramp to Interstate 465 while riding as a passenger on a motorcycle. The murder remains unsolved, although police theorize that the shooting was caused by an Outlaws ambush and that the intended target was Darrell W. Wino Sturgis, president of the Indianapolis Sons of Silence chapter from June 1978 to October 1980. Sturgis' girlfriend, Linda C. Massingale Rice, was stabbed to death on December 31, 1980. On November 15, 1981, Outlaws member John Big Jack Slater was left paralyzed after being shot with a .38 caliber pistol by Sons of Silence member Eric Doc Lewandowski outside the Sons clubhouse. Slater was then bundled into a van and killed with a 12-gauge shotgun by another Sons of Silence member, Hendrik Savage Jansen. Lewandowski was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, while Jansen was acquitted, as he testified that he believed Slater was already dead when he shot him. Bruce Burke Eastman was killed with a shotgun as he answered the door of the Sons of Silence Indianapolis clubhouse on the 30th of May, 1984. On February 24, 1991, a large group of outlaws were attacked by several members of the Sons of Silence at a motorcycle swap meet at the Indiana Convention Center in Indianapolis. Shots were fired, 3 people were wounded, and 2 Sons of Silence members were arrested. 12 guns and numerous knives were seized by police. Members and associates of the Indianapolis and Terre Haute chapters of the Sons of Silence were indicted in October 2011 following an FBI investigation into the club's activities known as Operation Sawmill. 12 people were convicted for participating in a methamphetamine ring that operated from approximately May 2010 until the arrests of most of the members of the organization on August 6, 2011. Philip Manabach, a member of the Terre Haute chapter, was also convicted of orchestrating the abduction of his stepson, which was carried out with the help of club hangarounds. The victim of the abduction had stolen approximately $5,000 in currency from Manabach, who was sentenced to life in prison on April 8, 2013. Sons of Silence members had a conflict with members of the Iron Order Motorcycle Club in a business parking lot in Crawfordsville on April 27, 2014. Firearms, knives and bats were used, and injuries were reported. In Iowa, Sons of Silence enforcer Ronald Merrill, Bad Ron Gruber, was sentenced to 35 years in prison for rape and assault in Black Hawk County in October 1977. While in Iowa State Penitentiary, he and another inmate were sued by 2 guards whom they assaulted. After being released, Gruber was one of a number of club members convicted on a 1994 federal racketeering charge. As a prisoner at FCI Greenville in Illinois in August 1996, Gruber was charged with the shotgun murder of Penny Jean Sternquist Weitzel, who was killed in Boone on November 30, 1984. In May 1997, Gruber pled guilty to second-degree murder in her death and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. He was paroled in 2012. Sons of Silence member Clark Joseph Cook was convicted of possession of methamphetamine after he was found to be carrying a bag of the drug during a traffic stop by the Iowa State Patrol on September 5, 1993. 14 members or former members were indicted in Cedar Rapids in November 1994, charged with racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and committing violence in aid of racketeering. 12 were immediately arrested and eventually pleaded guilty or were convicted. 2 others, Jeffrey Paul No Mind Gruber and Robert Bronk McAllister, remained fugitives until being apprehended in Washington state in July 1996. David Fairchild, who was one of the 12 convicted in 1995 and who received a 25-year prison sentence, began to cooperate with the government after his conviction and testified against Cedar Falls Waterloo chapter de facto leader and National Vice President Gruber, who was sentenced to life in prison. 6 members of the Boone Sons of Silence chapter, Russell John Schonauer, Robert Lee Skunk Norman, Gary Lee Walker, Daniel Lee Burns, Barry Craig Scarcello, and Stephen Lowell Henry, were arrested by the ATF on April 4, 2001 on the charges of trafficking cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine, as well as firearms, throughout the state of Iowa. 2 others, Pelayo Jose Tattoo Joe Cuervo and William John Furlong, were also later apprehended. Cuervo, Norman, and Schonauer, the Sons of Silence's national treasurer, were convicted of numerous narcotics and firearms offenses related to a conspiracy to distribute controlled substances that lasted from 1978 through 2001. Norman was sentenced to 29 years imprisonment, Cuervo was sentenced to 22 years, and Schonauer was sentenced to 17 years. Justin Carlson, aged 38, from Sheffield, Iowa, who was the enforcer for the Northern Iowa chapter of the Sons of Silence Motorcycle Club, was sentenced to 10 months in federal prison. He received the prison term after a March 19, 2021 guilty plea to one count of being a felon in possession of a firearm. In the guilty plea and sentencing proceedings, Carlson admitted that on April 5, 2020, Carlson, a convicted felon, and other members of the Sons of Silence and another affiliated group confronted a motorcyclist who was an off-duty police officer, claiming the officer needed permission from the Sons of Silence to wear one of the patches on the back of the motorcyclist's jacket. In a subsequent search of Carlson's home in Sheffield, Iowa, officers recovered Carlson's Sons of Silence motorcycle vest, which had a brass knuckles in the pocket, numerous items of Sons of Silence paraphernalia, and 2 firearms. Milton Charles "Barb Wire" Wilson, the president of the Sons of Silence's Kansas City chapter, was charged in May 2014 with transporting a minor across state lines for prostitution, along with Kayla Foxy Pinkerton. Wilson transported Pinkerton and the victim to various locations in Missouri and Kansas in December 2013. Both plead guilty to the crime on April 1, 2015. In September 2015, Wilson was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment and Pinkerton was sentenced to 16 months. In August 1984, Sons of Silence founder Bruce "The Dude" Richardson was sentenced to 6 years in prison after pleading guilty to hiring Robert Leslie Knitsky to organize the May 1984 abduction of Dr. Michael Rourke from a Buffalo hotel. It was claimed that Rourke owed Richardson's wife, Patricia Stranahan, approximately $260,000 after a failed business venture, and that the abduction was an attempt to retrieve some of this money after court proceedings to recover the funds had failed. As well as Stranahan, 3 others are sentenced in connection with the abduction: Michael Ratley, Robert Jordan, and Ariel Falcon. The Sons of Silence have established chapters in Bismarck, Fargo, Grand Forks, and Minot. The club is involved in methamphetamine trafficking throughout North Dakota, typically using smaller affiliated motorcycle gangs to distribute the drug at the retail level in order to gain insulation from law enforcement scrutiny. Mexican-produced methamphetamine is transported into North Dakota for distribution from Sons of Silence chapters in other states, primarily Colorado. The Sons of Silence are alleged to have ordered the murder of Williston rancher Jack Shaw, who went missing in April 2013, and whose body was found in rural Williams County the following month. Ryan Lee Stensaker was convicted of Seoul's murder on December 17, 2014, and was sentenced to life in prison. Billy Joe Herman, an enforcer for the Sons of Silence, but not a member of the club, pleaded guilty in April 2019 to the October 12, 2015 murder of Amanda Stuck Engst, who was killed on the Spirit Lake Reservation. Herman strangled Engst and put her in the trunk of her car with the help of Crystal Johnson, his then-wife. After beating Engst with a shovel, he dumped her tarp-wrapped body, which was tied to cinder blocks, into the Cheyenne River. Her body was found on February 4, 2016. Herman was sentenced to life in prison for Engst's murder, and Johnson was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her part as an accomplice. Fire at a home in Fargo on October 31, 2019, was connected to a feud between the Sons of Silence and Hells Angels, according to law enforcement. You're watching the Everything Network. The Breed Motorcycle Club was founded by Salvatore De Giulio in Asbury Park, New Jersey in 1965. The club was originally known as the New Breed, but the full title didn't fit properly on the colors. The Breed patched over the Riverside, New Jersey-based Aces and Eights Motorcycle Club and the Elizabeth, New Jersey-based Branded Motorcycle Club in 1983, due in parts of the efforts of Jim Irish Power, who was known as Irish Prez. He was known for his efforts to expand the club with minimal violence and his desire to make the club more profitable and larger in members. Power's efforts took the Breed to a level of profit and members that made the MC become a large force, not to be underestimated or taken lightly by its rival clubs. At its peak in the 1970s, the Breed was the most prominent outlaw motorcycle club in the state, and also had chapters in New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, with a membership of between 3,000 and 4,000. In March 1971, the club engaged in a confrontation with the Hells Angels in Cleveland, Ohio, which resulted in the deaths of 5 people. During the following 2 decades, the Breed were continuously attacked by the Hells Angels, including a hand grenade attack on the house of the Breed national president in Plainfield, New Jersey. The conflict with the Hells Angels, as well as infighting, law enforcement efforts, and a rivalry with the Pagans, led to the Breed decreasing in numbers to approximately 900 members by 1990, and in a reduced territory comprising Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Central and South Jersey. In 1989, the Breed had 2 chapters in New Jersey, the mother chapter operating out of Middlesex County, and the South Jersey chapter operating out of Riverside, run by Jim Irish Power, with most operations of the club being run out of the White Eagle Bar in Delran, NJ, and a Pennsylvania chapter in Bucks County. Membership was estimated at approximately 40 in 2000. This number, however, was greatly underestimated, as it was based on arrests that were made, rather than the actual number of members, estimated to legitimately be closer to 500. The Breed, along with their rival Pagans, became the most prominent distributors of methamphetamine in New Jersey, and were reportedly infamous among outlaw motorcycle clubs due to their propensity for recruiting expelled members of rival clubs, as well as for cooperating with law enforcement. The Breed was said to have gone defunct after being dismantled by a law enforcement operation against the club in 2006, which led to the imprisonment of 19 members for drug trafficking and racketeering. Breed Motorcycle Club was led by an executive board consisting of chapter presidents, which determined club policy. The executive board was ultimately headed by a national president. Each club chapter consisted of a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and sergeant-at-arms. Membership of the club was restricted to white males who would first serve a prospecting period before being voted in and awarded their colors. Prospective members were required to carry out illegal activities, such as car theft and armed robbery, and turn over the proceeds of these crimes to the club. 13. In addition to regional chapters, the Breed also operated a nomad chapter, made up of members not bound by geographical location, which served as an elite element within the club. The club's insignia consisted of a Betsy Ross flag with a Breed banner above. This insignia would be sewn onto the back of a sleeveless denim cutoff jacket, which was forbidden from being washed. Various other patches, including a 1% patch, would also be worn. The Breed are designated an outlaw motorcycle gang by the U.S. Department of Justice. The club engaged in organized criminal activities, including the production and distribution of methamphetamine, larceny, robbery, extortion, autocrime, weapons violations, intimidation, assault, and murder, and also operated legitimate businesses such as tattoo parlors and transport companies, which could serve as fronts for illegal activity. The breed was involved in conflicts with rival motorcycle gangs, such as the Hells Angels, Pagans, and Warlocks. Fred "Chic" Nicholas, the breed's South Jersey chapter president, was shot dead after being dragged from his home in Jackson Township by two men on August 30, 1968. Thomas G. Rusomano, Jr., pleaded no defense to Nicholas' murder on February 5, 1969, and testified that he and Patsy Truglia had gone to Nicholas' home to retrieve a motorcycle in Nicholas's possession that they believed had been stolen from Truglia, and that a gun that he was holding to threaten Nicholas had fired accidentally. On August 13, 1976, during a robbery by two gunmen of a check-cashing business in Kearney, one of the gunmen killed Newark police officer John Snow. A Hudson County grand jury indicted Alan Roller, Bruce Reen, Victor Forney, and Vincent James Landano for felony murder and armed robbery, along with other offenses. Roller was president of the breed's Staten Island, New York chapter. Reen was also a breed member, and Forney was a club associate, while Landano was a friend of Forney. The state believed that Roller and Forney planned the robbery, but that only Landano and Roller actually participated in the crime. Two accomplices and 3 eyewitnesses identified Landano as Snow's murderer, and he was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison for the crime in April 1977. Landano was acquitted of murder in a retrial in 1998 and died at the age of 63 on November 11, 2002. Breed members Kalani Loper and Thomas Heilman were arraigned on 2 counts each of kidnapping after abducting club member John McGurk and Patricia McDevitt from McGurk's Bordentown home in an attempt to collect a $1,200 debt on August 17, 1977. John Belowski and James R. Axel Fleming, both identified as breed members by authorities, and a third man, Pascal Verona, were arrested during a raid on an apartment in Asbury Park, which led to the seizure of handguns and almost $5,000 worth of cocaine on January 25, 1995. The 3 men were charged with drug and weapons offenses. Eugene Jean Bernardo, president of the breed's Monmouth County chapter, was charged with conspiracy to distribute almost 500 grams of methamphetamine in a 1-count federal indictment on January 6, 1998. He was convicted of the charge on May 26, 1999. Bernardo had acted as a middleman in a drug sale made by Carl Chianas to Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, informant Kalani Loper in January 1997. 2 breed members stabbed 2 pagans in a tattoo studio in Trenton in September 1998. 10 members of the breed, including National President Salvatore Old Man DiIulio, were indicted on charges of extortion and sexual assault on January 28, 2000. The club was allegedly running protection rackets on strip clubs, tattoo parlors, and other businesses in Long Branch. The sexual assault charges were brought after 4 women who danced at the clubs complained to the Howell Township Police. One woman claimed to have been chained to the floor for several days, forced to engage in oral sex with several men, and beaten severely. David Snyder, a strip club owner and former breed member, was allegedly assaulted after attempting to reduce the number of sexual assaults on the dancers. On November 4, 2000, 5 breed members were acquitted of extortion conspiracy. In June 2001, a Superior Court jury in Monmouth County acquitted DiIulio of aggravated assault in a case in which he allegedly beat and sexually assaulted a nude dancer. However, a hung jury was declared on 6 other charges, including aggravated sexual assault and weapons possession. Breed members Sanford Gorzelski, Scott Lear, and Frederick M. Guido de Capua were indicted in July 2003 and charged with robbery, aggravated assault, hindering apprehension, weapons possession, and retaliation against a witness. The trio allegedly attacked former Breed member Arne Ole Olsen at a bar in West Long Branch on October 5, 2002, in retaliation for his testimony in a court case involving other club members. On May 11, 2005, Gorzelski was convicted of aggravated assault, and Lear was found guilty of conspiracy to commit aggravated assault and retaliation, while De Capua was acquitted of all charges. One Breed member, Alfred Bressi, was fatally shot, and another, Joseph Pasquarella, was beaten and slashed during a confrontation with a group of around 10 Hells Angels members in Staten Island on July 25, 1971. 3 Hells Angels, Anthony Morabito, John Scott and Howard Weisbrod, were charged with assault. 7 members of the Breed allegedly committed an assault at gunpoint on 2 young women in a house on Staten Island in December 1971. 2 members, Edward Very and Joseph Pasquarella, were arrested and charged with the R-word and sodomy on January 6, 1972. In March 6, 1971, the Breed participated in a large-scale brawl with the Hells Angels at a motorcycle trade show in Cleveland, involving over 100 bikers from each side. 4 members of the Breed, Bruce Emmerich, Andrew Demeter, Emilio Gardel and Thomas A. Terry, and 1 Hells Angel, Jeffrey Groover Coffey, were stabbed to death and 23 people were injured, including 3 police officers. Dozens of vans and cars full of police officers were called in to break up the fight. Although most of the bikers were able to flee, 84 were arrested at the scene. On March 9, 1971, 47 Breed members and 10 Hells Angels were each charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The feud between the 2 clubs reportedly began after a fight in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2 years earlier, and continued during the following 2 decades. After being chased for over a mile by 12 Breed members on motorcycles, Michael Trunk, a pagan and former Breed member, was shot in the head and killed by Breed member Ralph Marlborough Waldman in Abington Township in Montgomery County on July 22, 1973. Trunk's colors were then stolen. After Waldman and other Breed members were arrested, a brawl involving Breed and pagans took place at Abington Police Station. Waldman was convicted of first-degree murder, aggravated assault, robbery, theft of movable property, criminal conspiracy, terroristic threats, and 2 counts of simple assault on October 30, 1975, and was sentenced to life in prison. 2 Breed members, George Schell and Joseph Zabrowski, and 3 pagans involved in the brawl were cleared of aggravated assault in September 1973 after they refused to press charges against each other. Mark Allen, Pockets Chancellor, a prospective member of the Breed, was shot dead during a club meeting attended by 7 other members at the farmhouse of Massery, Ohio chapter president John Gilkey. This happened in Mercer County on October 13, 1973. Chancellor was allegedly killed for unwittingly violating a club rule during his membership initiation. His body was found on October 26, 1973, in a shallow grave approximately 400 feet from the Gilkey home by officers of the Pennsylvania State Police acting on an anonymous tip-off. New York chapter member William M. Zilgit and New Jersey Mother chapter Sergeant-at-Arms Gary Roman were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. And Ohio chapter president Donald David Kraut Trefts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Trefts escaped from SCI Huntingdon on July 22, 1993, and was apprehended by Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI agents, and local police in Deadwood, South Dakota on April 6, 1995. Breed member Ernest C. Custer stabbed motorist Dennis Carson in the throat with a hunting knife and attempted to stab his passenger Albert Falls following a road rage incident on Route 1 in Bucks County on April 24, 1976. Custer claimed temporary insanity, but was found guilty of attempted murder, simple assault, aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and possession of a prohibited offensive weapon. In 1987 and 1989, Breed and Pagan's members were involved in incidents of assault and kidnapping to settle disputes or to retaliate for acts of violence against fellow members. In one incident, a Breed member wearing his colors in the Philadelphia area, considered Pagan territory, was assaulted and robbed of his colors by Pagan's members. Arrangements were made to negotiate a settlement to this dispute. However, 2 Breed members were arrested and charged with weapons offenses during the pre-arranged meeting. Reportedly, the 2 were present and armed to protect the chapter president who was handling negotiations. In December 1988, members of the Warlocks kidnapped the Breed's Bucks County chapter president, Craig "Coyote" Godnecht, in retaliation for several Warlocks being assaulted by Breed members at a bar in Bensalem Township. Godnecht was taken to the home of a Warlock, where he was tied up, beaten, and pistol-whipped. Godnecht escaped and subsequently reported the incident to police. On July 21, 2006, 15 members of the Breed were charged with running a large-scale methamphetamine ring after a year-long investigation by the Attorney General's Bureau of Narcotics Investigation, the Bucks County District Attorney's Office, and the Philadelphia Police Department, known as Operation Breed on a Wire. Among the indicted were Pennsylvania Chapter President John W. Jr. Napoli, New Jersey Mother Chapter President John A. Shameless Kovacs, and 13 other club members. Police also seized more than 22 pounds of methamphetamine, nearly $500,000 in cash and bank deposits, 44 firearms, including 1 submachine gun, 10 improvised explosive devices, various vehicles, and 24 motorcycles during a series of raids. Further charges relating to racketeering were added to the indictments of Napoli, William Tattoo Billy Johnson, Christopher Slam Quattrocchi, Thomas E. Fuzzy Heilman, Frederick Pan, amongst others. A grand jury found that Napoli was the ringleader of the drug organization, which operated in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and distributed over 120 pounds of methamphetamine between May 2005 and June 2006, which has an estimated street value of more than $11.25 million. A total of 19 Breed members were convicted in the case, receiving sentences ranging from 3 to 36 years in prison. On October 4, 2007, Napoli and Johnson were convicted of drug trafficking, racketeering and weapons charges, while Heilman was also convicted of conspiracy to traffic over 500 grams of methamphetamine. Napoli received the harshest sentence of all of his co-conspirators when he was sentenced to 36 years imprisonment in April 11th of 2008. Heilman was sentenced to 20 years on January 6th, 2008, and Johnson was sentenced to 35 years on April 11th, 2008. Operation Breed on a Wire and the resulting convictions effectively dismantled the club. Remaining members who avoided the indictments subsequently dispersed or joined other clubs. Several Breed members patched over to the Outlaws and established a chapter in Kensington, Philadelphia.
If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.
The Annihilators Mc was a Canadian biker club and organized crime group of the 1980s and 1990s. The club began as the Queensmen MC based in Amherstburg. The Queensmen were established in the 1950s. From 1977 to 2000, the most powerful biker club in Ontario were the Outlaws. In 1982, the Outlaw chapter in London, Ontario, arranged to have the Amersfoort Queensmen move up to the London area to serve as a puppet club, which was renamed as the Holocaust Motorcycle Club and based in Chatham. Wayne Kellerstein was appointed the president of the Holocaust Club, whose name had been intentionally chosen with the aim of being offensive. The logo of the Holocaust Club was a white skull with a lightning bolt, which was clearly inspired by the SS logo of a Totenkopf with two white lightning bolt runes that read SS. Kellerstein had been seeking to join the Outlaws since 1977, and the decision to appoint him president of the Holocaust Club was a sop to his ego, as the Outlaws did not want him as a member of their club proper. The best-known member of the Holocaust Club was Brian Bocage, who had been one of the leaders of the prison riot at the Kingston Penitentiary that took place between April 14th and April 18th, 1971. Brian had a certain degree of fame in the Canadian underworld for his actions during the prison riot, when he used a board with a nail sticking through it to execute two child molester prisoners. In 1985, he quarrelled with Kellerstein, which led him to move to Kitchener, where he joined Satan's Choice, the enemies of the Outlaws. In 1988, the club was renamed as the Annihilators and relocated to St. Thomas, but Kellerstein continued as club president. The logo of the Annihilators was a mailed fist clenching the lightbolt runes of the SS. The journalist Jerry Langton called the Annihilators small-time crooks. The journalist Peter Edwards called the Annihilators a motley but tough gang, whose members joined with the hope of being promoted up to join the Outlaws. The clubhouse of the Annihilators on 54 Munderman Street in St. Thomas was described as a decaying building with steel plates on the windows and security cameras all around. Kellerstein had a practice of tossing roofing nails into the parking lot to keep police cars away from the clubhouse, which he would then forget where he placed, thus puncturing the tires of any automobile that happened to park in the clubhouse's parking lot. The Annihilators clubhouse was known to locals as a booze can, where contraband cigarettes together with stolen goods were sold by the Annihilators, who spent their days and nights at the clubhouse drinking and playing pool. The Toronto biker Frank Lenti called the clubhouse a glorified chicken coop that was dirty and smelly. In an interview with the journalist Yves Levine, published in the London Free Press on April 18, 1998, the Annihilators were described by Levine as having a low profile, making money on the drug trade. In February 1989, during the annual London Motorcycle Show, which was hosted at the Western Fairgrounds, the president of the Annihilators Motorcycle Club St. Thomas chapter, Wayne Kellerstein, became inebriated at the event. Kellerstein physically assaulted a police officer and then attempted to flee by hijacking a limousine, leading to a car chase that ended with him crashing the car into the Outlaws clubhouse located on Egerton Street. Kellerstein was charged with assaulting a police officer, theft, public drunkenness, property damage, resisting arrest and driving under the influence of alcohol, and was convicted on all counts. The incident confirmed Kellerstein's reputation as a heat score, underworld slang for a criminal who attracts police attention with his antics, which was why he was never invited to join the Outlaws, and why his club would cease to be a support club for the Outlaws in the late 1990s. In January 1992, the Annihilators first attracted widespread attention when Kellerstein led the police to the body of David Kenneth O'Neill, which was found buried in a shallow grave in a cornfield near Kellerstein's farmhouse at 32196 Aberdeen Line, outside of Iona Station. O'Neill was wanted for killing Constable Scott Rossiter of the Ontario Provincial Police, OPP, on 19th of September 1991. The manhunt for O'Neill attracted international attention, being featured on the American television show Unsolved Mysteries. During his time on the run, O'Neill constantly sought out the company of the Annihilators. Michael Simmons, a police informer within the Outlaws, accused the Annihilators of O'Neill's murder, saying in an interview, he wouldn't stay put. So they put him on ice. After the murder, Kellerstein, together with 3 other Annihilators, started to wear the SS runes patches on the front of their biker jackets, which within the outlaw biker subculture indicates one has committed a murder. In February 1991, Michael Simmons, the brother of Andrew Teach Simmons, the Outlaws' national president who lived in London, Ontario, became a police informer. On the 12th of March 1992, the Ontario Provincial Police arrested 18 people, including 2 outlaws, with the rest being Annihilators. On June 2, 1999, the Annihilators Motorcycle Club joined by the larger Loners Motorcycle Club based in Woodbridge. It was led by Gennaro Jimmy Rasso. In face of the challenge coming from the Hells Angels, Kellerstein decided he needed allies, and with the Outlaws being unwilling to accept him, he had decided to merge with the Loners instead. Kellerstein, the Annihilators' president, became the new president of the Chatham chapter of the Loners at the time of the merger in 1999. Following Kellerstein into the Loners was another Annihilator, Giovanni Musadere. For Kellerstein and Musadere, joining the Loners was a step up in the outlaw biker world, while the Loners, a disproportionate number of whom were Italian Canadians from middle-class families, could barely hide their disdain for the Annihilators, whom they viewed as rustic bumpkins from southwestern Ontario. This merging of the Annihilators along with other clubs into the Loners was done in an attempt to increase the club's membership, to deal with the incoming threat of the Hells Angels. One prominent Loner, Irish immigrant Glenn Wrongway Atkinson, was heard to remark after meeting Kellerstein for the first time, "Can you believe the type of people we're attracting?" The Rockers MC was first set up in 1992 by Montreal Charter President of the Hells Angels Maurice "Mom" Boucher. It was during this time several organized crime entities were competing for drug turf across the French-speaking province. The Hells Angels, being amongst one of the big players in the criminal underworld, were challenged by a rivaling outlaw motorcycle gang known as the Rock Machine. Territory disputes between the Hells Angels and Rock Machine began to overlap with one another, which incited much conflict between the two before a large-scale gang war broke in the early 90s. The Rockers were officially established a couple years before the Quebec Biker War began by high-ranking Hells Angels crime boss Mom Boucher. The aim of the club's creation was to provide more manpower and followers who were willing to commit crimes in order to become Hells Angels. In addition, the club was also set up as a means to distance the Hells Angels from unwanted police attention that would especially come from street-level crimes, and, thus, were often called upon to carry out the so-called dirty work. Several other Hells Angels supporter motorcycle clubs were established for this same purpose around, and after this time, including the Damners MC, Demon Keepers MC, Evil Ones MC, Jackals MC, Jokers MC, Mercenaries MC, and the Rowdy Crew MC. The Rockers were different from any other of the said Hells Angels puppet clubs, however, as they acted exclusively as the group's enforcement arm. When setting up the Rockers, Maurice Boucher hand-picked his ambitious Haitian-Canadian protégé, Gregory Picasso Woolley, to shepherd the outlaw biker club. Woolley, an up-and-coming crime boss who got his start as an early member of the small-time crackdown posse street gang, had already worked alongside the Hells Angels as Maurice Boucher's bodyguard, and earned his reputation after successfully forging an alliance between the Hells Angels and the influential Italian-Canadian Rizzuto crime family, as well as several of the area's local street gangs, to manage Greater Montreal's illicit drug market. Woolley would shortly go on to form the Syndicate in 1998, another criminal organization to collaborate jointly with the Angels. As a support club, synonymously referred to by police as puppet clubs, the Rockers MC operated under the discretion of the Hells Angels, most notably its Quebec Nomads chapter, which consisted of Canada's most reputable and high-ranking members. In the context of law enforcement, supporter motorcycle gangs like the Rockers Motor Club act as auxiliary organizations to their dominant affiliated gang and, like in the case of the Rockers, may be used to help them facilitate various criminal activities. During the year of 1995, Anglo-Canadian Hells Angels leader and Nomad chapter member Walter Nurget Stadnik instructed the Rockers Motor Club to found an auxiliary outlaw motorcycle club of their own, which would be based out of out west in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The resulting 1%er supporter club that came about was the Redliners, which Stadnik planned Ned to oppose two of Western Canada's dominant biker gangs, the Los Brovos and the Spartans MC. One of the most notable members of the Rockers was Danny Kane, a criminal from Montérégie who would later become a police informant for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Sûreté du Québec. While a member of the Rockers, Danny Kane would later come into contact with a small-time crook named Aimé Ace Samard via a gay online dating service. Unbeknownst to friends or acquaintances of either two, they engaged in a bisexual relationship with one other. Kane would eventually sponsor Samard into the ranks of Rockers MC. As a newly initiated member, Samard committed his first serious crime for them in early February 1997, after he shot and seriously wounded a drug dealer who had owed money to the club, along with his girlfriend, who was also present at the scene of the attack. Not long after, Ames Samard and Danny Kane travelled to Halifax, Nova Scotia, on orders of high-ranking Hells Angels Street Lieutenant David Wolfe Carroll to eliminate a drug-dealing businessman named Robert Bob McFarlane, who had owed a financial debt to the Hells Angels. When the pair made their way into the province on February 27, 1997, Kane and Samard tracked down and confronted McFarlane at an industrial park, who attempted to flee when they approached him. Before long, McFarlane was gunned down by Ames Samard, marking the very first murder he had carried out for the club. To reward his success, the Rockers Motor Club granted Samard a spot on their crew of assassins, comedically referred to as their football team. Amidst of the war with Rock Machine, Rockers MC biker Paul Fontaine, better known as Fon Fon, along with an accomplice, murdered provincial prison guard Pierre Rondeau and nearly killed Rondeau's colleague, Robert Corriveau, on September 8, 1997. The attack was ordered by Maurice Boucher in an attempt to destabilize the Quebec justice system and frighten police informants who were either members or associates of the Hells Angels. Fontaine was successfully awarded with membership into the Hells Angels MC Quebec Nomads chapter for this act. In response to the targeted murder of senior Hells Angel Normand Hamel on April 17, 2000, by Rock Machine MC members, a long-standing Hells Angels affiliated MC based in Laval, Quebec, known as the Death Riders, assimilated into a new chapter of the Rockers Motor Club, which became known as Rockers MC North. Acting on behalf of the Hells Angels, this newly formed support charter oversaw the drug trade in Laval, as well as the Lower Laurentides region in southwestern Quebec. There is wide speculation amongst journalists and law enforcement alike that much of the gang-related homicides that occurred during the notorious Quebec Biker War were committed by bikers who belonged to the Rockers Motor Club. It is alleged that nearly all of such individuals had been driven by the desire to prove their worth to the Hells Angels MC, hoping to be admitted as full-patch members. The majority of Rockers MC members were arrested by the Quebec authorities in 2001 following a massive law enforcement crackdown involving the RCMP, Sûreté du Québec, Ontario Provincial Police, and the Service de Police de la Ville de Montréal, known as Operation Springtime. This, in turn, caused the gang to disband for good. In 1998, gang hitman Aim Simard testified against 5 Rockers MC bikers before he was sentenced to life imprisonment on 3 counts of second-degree murder, along with other criminal offences. Several years later, he was found stabbed to death in his prison cell on July 18, 2003, while incarcerated at Saskatchewan Penitentiary in Prince Albert. Rockers member Danny Kane committed suicide in his garage, though the use of carbon monoxide gases from his car's exhaust system in August 2000. You're watching the Everything Network. In approximately 1982, Salvatore Cazzetta was a member of the SS, a white supremacist motorcycle gang based in Pointe-aux-Trembles on the eastern tip of the island of Montreal. The club was also known as the SS Merciless Riders. Fellow SS member Maurice Boucher became friends with Cazzetta, and as leaders of the club, the pair became candidates to join the Hells Angels when that club expanded into Canada. Giovanni Cazzetta had joined the Outlaws Motorcycle Club at a young age and had been involved in the First Biker War. He had remained a member of the organization in Quebec until 1984, when he left to join his brother in the SS Motorcycle Club. A Lennoxville, Quebec, chapter of the Hells Angels suspected in March 1985 that the Laval chapter was interfering with drug profits through personal use of products intended for sale. It is believed that the Laval chapter's invitation to a Lennoxville chapter party led to the ambush and death of 5 Laval members. Divers located the decomposing bodies of the victims at the bottom of the St. Lawrence River, wrapped in sleeping bags and tied to weightlifting plates 2 months after the party. The event became known as the Lennoxville Massacre, and its extreme nature earned the Quebec chapter of the Hells Angels a notorious reputation. Cazzetta considered the event an unforgivable breach of the Outlaw Code and, rather than joining the Hells Angels, in 1986 formed his own club, the Rock Machine, with his brother Giovanni. They recruited some of the best talent around and formed alliances with the Rizzuto crime family, the West End Gang, and the Dubois Gang. Giovanni Cazzetta would hold the position of second in command. Only Salvatore would hold more influence. Future Rock Machine national president, Fred Fauché, later said, "Sal once told me, those Hells Angels guys, they operate their club in such a way that I didn't want to join them." The founding members of the Rock Machine were Salvatore Cazzetta, his younger brother Giovanni, and a few close friends of theirs, many of whom were members of the SS Motorcycle Club. Other founding members included Paul Sasquatch Porter, Johnny Plesio, Andrew Curly Sauvageau, Renaud Jompf, Gilles Lambert, Martin Bourget, Richard Bam Bam Lagacé, Serge Pinel, and several others. On the surface, the Rock Machine ran operations like tattoo parlors and bars, as well as motorcycle repair shops. What the group truly profited off was the sale of narcotics and other prohibited goods. As the Rock Machine charged much less for their cocaine than did the Hells Angels, the gang quickly won much market share in the Montreal area. The Hells Angels had been badly weakened by the Lennoxville Massacre on March 24, 1985, when 5 members of the Angels chapter in Laval were shot by their colleagues. Afterward, the vacuum was filled by a number of Montreal-based organized crime groups, most prominent being the Rock Machine. And it was not until the early 1990s that the Angels became a major force in Montreal organized crime again. Initially, Rock Machine members chose not to wear Hells Angels-style leather vests that could easily identify members, and instead wore rings displaying an eagle insignia. This would last until the 1995, with the adoption of 3-piece vests. The official Rock Machine Club motto is "À la vie, à la mort," or "to the life until death." The club that possesses a patch with letters that stands for Rock Machine Forever Forever Rock Machine, an extremely common thing among outlaw motorcycle clubs. In April 1992, Giovanni Cazzetta was arrested by police and charged with trafficking narcotics. Police found him to be in possession of 3 kilograms of cocaine worth around $120,000, modern equivalent, when adjusting for inflation, of $246,000 US. He was forced to plead guilty to 4 charges the following spring and would be sentenced to 4 years in prison. Giovanni was released in 1997 and briefly participated in the conflict that was to come. Maurice Boucher was released after finishing a 40-month sentence for armed sexual assault, joined the Hells Angels, and was subsequently promoted within the club's ranks. The Hells Angels and Rock Machine coexisted peacefully for many years, a situation that, according to police officials, was due to Boucher's respect for his friend, Cazzetta, and the latter's connections with the Quebec Mafia, the only organized crime group that the motorcycle gangs were unwilling to attack. The Rock Machine Motorcycle Club gained the status of a hang-around club in May 1999, and after 18 months, became a probationary chapter of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club in December of the year 2000. Bandidos national officer Edward Winterhalder was put in charge of overseeing the transition by Bandidos International President George Wagers. The original version of the Rock Machine from 1986 to 1999 in Canada changed their colors from black and platinum to red and gold in May 1999. Their colors remained red and gold until they became full patch Bandidos on December 1, 2001. In a patch-over ceremony at the Rock Machine's Kingston Chapter Clubhouse, a second version of the Rock Machine was founded in 2008 in Winnipeg under the leadership of Sean Crazy Dog Brown, adopting the original black and platinum colors as their patch. The second version has no connection with the first version. The club's racial policy is all-inclusive and possesses members from several different ethnicities around the world, including African Canadian and/or African Americans. Despite the group's use of the Waffen-SS's double lightning bolt on one of their patches, it is mainly to show respect to the club's historical roots, as opposed to the racial meaning of the symbol, due to large numbers of their founding members being a part of the SS Motorcycle Club. It is also worn due to its status in the motorcycle community. It is seen as an outlaw symbol, as society dictates people should not wear it. Thus, outlaws usually wear it as a sign of rebellion against societal standards, as opposed to racial ideology. Founder of the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club, Salvatore Cazzetta was arrested at a pit bull farm located in Fort Erie, Ontario, during 1994. He was charged with attempting to import more than 11 tons, 22,000 pounds of cocaine, valued at an estimated $275 million. Claude Vezina, who was president of the Quebec City chapter at the time, became the new national president of the Rock Machine. Renaud Jomph was made president of the Montreal chapter, while Marcel Demers became the president of the Quebec City chapter, until eventually opening the Beauport chapter in late 1996. Recently promoted Hells Angels Montreal President Boucher began to increase pressure on the Rock Machine shortly after the arrest, which initiated the Quebec Biker War. The local Rock Machine Motorcycle Club formed an affiliation, the Alliance, with Montreal crime families such as the Pelletier clan, Dark Circle, and other independent dealers who wished to resist the Hells Angels' attempts to establish a monopoly on street-level drug trade in the city. A violent turf war ensued with the Hells Angels. The Rock Machine MC, its support clubs, and the Pelletier clan would provide manpower, while the Dark Circle would provide the funding. The Dark Circle's leadership was ruled by a committee of 5. The chairman was Michel Duclos. Boucher organized puppet clubs to persuade Rock Machine-controlled bars and their resident drug dealers to surrender their illegal drug business. This led to the creation of the Palmers MC, a Rock Machine MC support club with chapters in Montreal and Quebec City. It was created to counter Hells Angels' allies, the Rockers MC, Evil Ones, and Death Riders MC support clubs. It was led and organized by Rock Machine members Jean Lefrancais Ducaire and André Dédé Desormeaux, who was initially a member of the Dark Circle, but joined the Rock Machine. These two were described as the grandfathers of the Palmers MC. All of its members would be patched into the Rock Machine in 2000. The starting point of the conflict is disputed. However, on July 13, 1994, 3 members of the Rock Machine entered a business in downtown Montreal. They assassinated Pierre Daoust, a member of a Hells Angels support club, the Death Riders Motorcycle Club. Once it was confirmed they had the right target, he was shot 16 times in the head and torso. There was very little coverage over this incident. However, many in Montreal's underground knew that the Rock Machine was defending its territory months before the death of Daoust. The members of the Alliance, Rock Machine MC, Pelletier Clan, the Dark Circle, as well as other individual narcotics dealers and street gangs, all met to discuss a united front against the Hells Angels, after they gave the narcotics community of Quebec an ultimatum to have them as their mandatory supplier of all contraband goods and narcotics. This offer was refused, and the alliance was formed. Due to the Hells Angels' monopolistic attitude, they had decided to take the initiative and strike first. A day after, on the 14th of July 1994, the Rock Machine attempted to assassinate Norman Robitaille, a member of Hells Angels support club, the Rockers MC, and a future and prominent member of the Hells Angels. The attempt failed, and Quebec police announced that they had arrested 5 members of the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club for planning to bomb the Evil Ones MC clubhouse, which was also aligned with the Hells Angels. With current knowledge of events due to information from Sylvain Boulanger, it is known that on July 15, 1994, the hierarchy of the Hells Angels in Quebec held emergency meetings in the city of Longueuil, Quebec. All 4 chapters in Quebec at the time were present: Montreal, Quebec City, Trois-Rivières, and Sherbrooke. There was also a meeting at Hells Angels Bunker during this period of time. All chapters had to cast a vote on whether or not they would participate in the conflict against the Rock Machine and their alliance. All 4 chapters agreed, and the club began to prepare for the long conflict ahead. The Hells Angels was an international organization and received aid from all over the country and internationally, giving them more support than the Rock Machine. On the 19th of October 1994, a local drug dealer, Maurice Lavoie, was gunned down in his car, and his girlfriend was wounded. Lavoie had previously been buying his wares from the Pelletier clan associated with the Rock Machine, but had recently switched to the Hells Angels, and as a result, the Pelletier clan hired a hitman named Patrick Call to kill Lavoie. On the 28th of October 1994, Sylvain Pelletier, the leader of the Pelletier clan, was killed by the Hells Angels, who threatened to murder any drug dealer who did not buy their supplies from them. After these killings, an increasingly murderous struggle for the control of the drug trade in Montreal began between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine that would see 20 dead before the end of 1994. After Pelletier was killed, the independent drug dealers of Montreal formed the Alliance to Fight the Angels, headed by his younger brother, Harold Pelletier, whose first act was an attempt to assassinate Boucher in November 1994. Another member of the Pelletier clan, Martin Simard, purchased enough stolen dynamite to fill a truck, which was left near Boucher's favorite restaurant by Alliance member Martin Pellerin. The plan was to set off the explosives by remote control when Boucher arrived, killing him and everybody else in the restaurant. But a Montreal parking officer noticed the truck was parked illegally and had it towed, thus unknowingly foiling the plot. On June 24, 1995, Boucher founded the Nomads, an elite chapter of the Angels, that unlike the other chapters, had no geographical limit and were to operate all over Canada. To join the Nomads, applicants were required to commit murders, which ensured that no undercover police agents could enter the Nomads chapter. Additionally, only the highest quality Angels who had proven themselves could join the Nomads. On the 13th of August 1995, a jeep wired with a remote-controlled bomb exploded, killing Hells Angels associate Mark Dube and an 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, who was playing in a nearby schoolyard. An Interpol informant claimed that the plan was created and facilitated by Boucher to earn back public credit. The first full-patch Hells Angels member was shot to death entering his car at a shopping mall a month later. 9 bombs went off around the province during his funeral, targeting several Hells Angels businesses and properties. This series of violence related to Operation Wolverine, a police crackdown on both groups in which 130 were arrested. In October 1995, Harold Pelletier, one of the heads of the Pelletier clan, member of the Alliance, turned himself into the Sûreté du Québec, confessing that on the night of 7th of August 1983, he murdered a drug dealer named Michel Beaulieu, who was behind in his payments to the Pelletier clan, and asked that the police provide him with protection from the Angels in exchange for more information about his crimes. Ultimately, he confessed to committing 17 murders between 1983 and 1995, yet he was convicted only of the murder of Beaulieu. Pelletier's murder of Beaulieu was classified as second-degree murder, despite the fact Beaulieu had fallen asleep after Harold got him drunk before he was shot. Since the murder was premeditated, it should have been classified as a first-degree murder. Steinert was the biggest pimp in Montreal, owning the Sensations escort service, whose office in Montreal was destroyed in a case of arson in August 1996 by the Rock Machine. In his plea bargain struck in June 1996, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a promise that he receive full parole after 10 years served, in exchange for which he shared all he knew about the Montreal underworld. The Crown justified the plea bargain with Pelletier, given that he was guilty of 17 murders, on the grounds he was a mine of information about the underworld of Montreal. His motives for striking a plea bargain was that the Alliance against the Angels was collapsing with Alliance members defecting over to the Angels, and he wanted Crown protection from the Angels. However, Pelletier violated the terms of his plea bargain, under which he promised not to commit any more crimes, when he was caught in 2002 attempting to bribe another prison inmate to kill a prisoner whom he disliked, allowing the Crown to revoke its agreement, and Pelletier was not released in June 2006, as was promised 10 years earlier. He finally received full parole in December 2013, after he completed his high school equivalency degree, started attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and demonstrated an ability to get along with penitentiary staff. On the 18th of October 1996, President of the Rock Machine Montreal chapter, Renaud Jompf, was shot and killed. The Rock Machine leader was seated with fellow club members Christian Deschaines and Raymond Leroux in a booth at the rear of a Chinese restaurant known as Restaurant Kim Hoa, located on Wellington Street. A man entered the establishment and approached the table, fired several shots, and fled out the rear of the building. Jompf and Deschaines were killed, while Leroux was wounded in the shoulder. One of the Paradis brothers, Peter Paradis, would succeed Jompf as president of the Montreal chapter, taking over much of his business in the suburb of Verdun. In November 1996, the Rock Machine planted a bomb in the old Hells Angels bunker in St. Nicholas, and the residential neighborhood where it was located was shaken by the immense force of the blast. The bunker received significant damage. On the 28th of March 1997, Rocker member Aimé Simard stating he was acting under the orders of the rocker president. A man known as Gregory Pissarro Woolley murdered Rock Machine member Jean-Marc Casey as he entered a Montreal arena to play hockey with his friends. In early 1997, Giovanni Cazzetta was released from prison. He would return to the Rock Machine. Claude Vezina Willing stepped down, and Giovanni was given the position of national president in his brother's absence. He would lead the club through the conflict until May 1997. In May, Giovanni was subject to a police sting in which a man from Alberta attempted to purchase 15 kilos of cocaine, valued at $600,000. This individual turned out to be an informant for the Crown. The mules Frank Bonneville and Donald Waite that delivered the cocaine to the informant were arrested, and the narcotics seized by police. Matix, Bonneville and Waite pled guilty on 17th of June 1997 and were sentenced to 3, 4, and 2 years respectively. Claude Vezina would be momentarily reinstated as national president of the Rock Machine. Giovanni attempted to fight the charges brought against him. However, he would lose these appeals. He was sentenced to 5 years prison time in April 1998. While Maria Cazzetta, Giovanni's sister, and Suzanne Poudrier received 1-year conditional sentences. On the 19th of May 1997, prominent Rock Machine member Serge Cyr was placed under arrest and charged with conspiracy along with 13 others, including members of the Rock Machine, Pelletier clan and Palmer's MC, for planning the murder of Hells Angels president Maurice "Mom" Boucher. In 1994, a stolen van loaded with explosives was discovered outside the Cry-Cree restaurant on St. Catherine Street. The restaurant was an establishment that Boucher often ate at. Cyr was released soon after, with the condition that he would report to police once a week, which he never did. Cyr gained reputation from this, and after the December 2000 arrests, he was promoted to president of the Montreal chapter. On the 21st of May 1997, Claude Vezina and his sergeant-at-arms Danny Legros-Legare were both charged with the trafficking of narcotics. In order to conduct his arrest, police had to sneak by guard dogs that he had located on his property. They entered his home and arrested him in his bedroom. This was all the result of a sting operation set up by the Quebec police. A police informant had completed 7 transactions of narcotics with the 2 members of Rock Machine during a 5-month period. The massive raid launched by authorities as part of Operation Carcajou resulted in the seizure of a laboratory where narcotics such as PCP and methamphetamine were produced. Over $1.5 million worth of various other narcotics, dynamite plus detonators, 7 pistols, 2 fully automatic machine guns, 3 semi-automatic carbines, and a pistol suppressor. After the arrest of Vezina, Frédéric Fauché became the Rock Machine's new national president. On September 11, 1997, Alain Red Tomato Brunet was promoted to president of the Quebec City chapter. In mid-1997, an imprisoned Hells Angel, Denise Hull, was the victim of an unsuccessful assassination attempt when a Rock Machine member opened fire on him from beyond the prison fence. The resulting investigation first alerted the public to the existence of the Dark Circle, and it was reported the Hells Angels would pay well for information identifying the members of the Dark Circle. Over the next 2 years, 2 members of the Dark Circle were murdered by the Hells Angels, while a third escaped when the Hells Angels shot and killed the wrong side. As the war turned into a battle of attrition, the Hells Angels began to gain the upper hand as ever-increasing levels of support poured in from around Canada and internationally. But at the same time, the Great Nordic Biker War was taking place, and the Rock Machine was impressed with the way that the Scandinavian branches of the Bandidos held their own against the Scandinavian branches of the Hells Angels. In June 1997, the 3 leaders of the Rock Machine, Fred Fauché, Johnny Plescio, and Robert Toot Toot Léger, went to Stockholm to seek support from the Swedish branch of the Bandidos, but were expelled by the Swedish police, who declared that they did not want Canadian bikers in their country. Fauché had been the president of the Rock Machine Quebec City chapter prior to his promotion to national president. He had gained wide attention in underworld circles by blowing up the Hells Angels in Quebec City in February 1997. And after the Rock Machine's leader, Claude T. Loup Vezina, was arrested for drug smuggling, he became the Rock Machine's new leader on September 11, 1997. Fauché decided the best hope for the Rock Machine was to have the club absorbed into the Bandidos, the second largest outlaw biker club in the world. On the 23rd of August 1998, a team of Rock Machine killers consisting of Frédéric Fauché, Gerald Gallant, and Marcel Demers rode by on their motorcycles and gunned down Paolo Cotroni in his driveway. Cotroni was a member of the Calabrian 'Ndrangheta Cotroni crime family, who were the rivals of the Sicilian mafia Rizzuto crime family. Citation needed. Cotroni was killed partly to gain the favor of the Rizzutos, and partly because he was a friend of Boucher. On the 8th of September 1998, Johnny Plescio, a founding member of the Rock Machine, was at his Laval home watching television when his cable was severed. As he rose to see what was wrong with his television, 27 bullets went through Plescio's living room window, 16 of which struck him. At Plescio's funeral, a flower arrangement appeared bearing the word Bandidos, which was the first sign that the Bandidos Motorcycle Club of Texas was taking an interest in the Rock Machine. On October 28, 1998, police arrested 25 Rock Machine members and associates as they were eating dinner in the restaurant of a downtown hotel. The men were forced to lie face down on the ground. They were searched and then placed under arrest. Richard Lagacé and Denis Belleau were among those arrested. Many were freed the next day, after swearing to stay away from the others that were picked up by police. Disaster struck the Dark Circle when one of their number, Salvatore Brunetti, a restaurateur, bar owner and drug dealer, defected to the Hells Angels and gave them a list of the remaining members of the Dark Circle, which basically led to their collapse, leaving the Rock Machine and fragmented members of the Alliance to face the Hells Angels and their support clubs. By 1999, the Rock Machine MC was seriously looking to align itself with longtime Hells Angels rivals, the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, as the other factions in the Alliance had been devastated, with the Rock Machine itself receiving substantial losses. During May 1999, the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club became a hang-around club for the Bandidos. April 17, 2000, Normand Hamel, one of the Nomads, was killed when attempting to flee from Rock Machine assassins in a Laval parking lot, while he and his wife took his son to the doctor. He was the most senior member of the Hells Angels killed during the conflict. On May 12, 2000, the Angels tried to kill the two Rock Machine members, Tony Doguet and Denis Boucher, suspected of killing Hamel, leading to a wild car crash, during which Doguet took bullet wounds to his arms, right hand, and thigh. About 40 police officers from the Carcajou squad raided the Rock Machine chapter in Beauport but found nothing worthwhile, and in June 2000, the Rock Machine set up in Ontario began recruiting former members of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. In July 2000, Boucher's plans to set up an internet company were derailed when Robert Bob Savard, the loan shark who charged 52% interest on the loans he made to the desperate and needy, was gunned down at the Déjeuner Extra restaurant in the north end of Montreal. Savard had been a Hells Angels associate for several years and was considered a right-hand man for Boucher. Savard's dinner companion, Normand Descoteaux, a hockey player turned loan shark, was also a target, but he survived by grabbing a waitress, Hélène Brunet, and using her as an involuntary human shield, ensuring that she took 4 bullets meant for him. Despite the way Brunet took bullets in her arms, legs and shin, Descoteaux was not charged. The shooters were infamous Canadian hitman Gerald Gallant and an unidentified associate of his. Gallant was employed by Michel Duclos, the leader of the Dark Circle, and also frequently carried out contracts for the Rock Machine during the conflict with the Hells Angels. From 1980 to 2003, he was responsible for 28 murders and 13 attempted murders. His most active years were during the Quebec Biker War, where he killed 2 members of Hells Angels support clubs in 1997, and a third survived an assassination attempt. In 1998, when he eliminated 5 men, including Paul Catroni Jr., son of deposed mob boss Frank Catroni, making 1998 his most prominent year as a hitman, he also at periods worked for the Irish-Canadian West End gang. During this period, both groups started to expand into Ontario, with both opening several clubhouses. The Rock Machine would open 3 chapters in Ontario: Toronto, Kingston, and Niagara Falls. The Loners had aligned themselves with the Rock Machine, holding a party in Toronto in June 2000 that was attended by dozens of machinists, as the Rock Machine are known in outlaw biker circles. Also in June 2000, before the Hells Angels. Not wanting to lose ground to the Rock Machine in the province, Hells Angels opened its first clubhouse and in 2000 and gave a limited-time offer to outlaw motorcycle clubs in Ontario, especially Satan's Choice and the Paradise Riders. There would be no probationary period for Hells Angels Club membership, and all members would receive full patch. This resulted in 168 members of the Paradise Riders, Satan's Choice, Lobos and Last Chance, patching to the Angels. Overnight, the Hells Angels went from 1 chapter in Ontario to 14, giving them a massive advantage in the province. This gave the Hells Angels 29 chapters in total, with 418 full-patch members in Quebec, Ontario, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. On the 6th of December 2000, 255 police officers tracked and arrested 16 Rock Machine members and associates on narcotics trafficking charges. The Ring, operated by Marcel Dimmers, leader of the Beauport chapter, and National President Fred Fauché of the Quebec City chapter, were accused of distributed more than 2 kilograms of cocaine a month and generated almost $5 million in profits. Alain Brunet would he promoted to the position of national president until he became the first president of Bandidos Canada on December 1, 2001. Jean-Claude Belanger would replace Brunet as president of the Quebec City chapter. Robert Léger would head the Beauport chapter until his death. Also in December 2000, the Rock Machine officially became a probationary club of the Bandidos. Seeing the division, this caused the Hells Angels would approach the alliance with the offer of a ceasefire brokered by the Rizzuto crime family, which was accepted. The truce had an ulterior motive for the Hells Angels as they hoped to halt the expansion of the Bandidos in Canada, especially Ontario. The Hells Angels would also convince members of the Rock Machine who did not agree with the patch over to join them. The truce would last for only a brief period before hostilities continued. 2000, most of the Rock Machine's Ontario members joined the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels national president, Walter Stadnick, offered the Hells Angels membership to the Rock Machine's Kingston and Toronto chapters, while excluding the London chapter, saying that the members of the London chapter were unqualified to be Hells Angels. Most of the Ontario members of the Rock Machine took up Stadnick's offer, as it was felt that the Bandidos patch with its cartoonish drawing of a Mexican bandit was silly. Furthermore, Stadnick offered Hells Angels membership on a patch-for-patch basis, allowing members to trade their current patches for equivalent Hells Angels, while the Bandidos required new members take a reduction in rank. Paul Sasquatch Porter, a founding member of the Rock Machine and the president of their Kingston chapter, wrote on the wall of the clubhouse, "Hello to all the RMMC. I wish you the best with your new colors. Bye, my brothers." Porter became the president of the Hells Angels' New Ottawa chapter. The fact that the Hells Angels had conspired to kill Porter when he was a member of the Rock Machine did not stop him from defecting. Regardless of the prior issues, on December 1, 2001, the Rock Machine Motorcycle Club became official members of the Bandidos Canada in a patch-over ceremony at the Rock Machine's Kingston chapter clubhouse. The Bandidos Canada inherited 7 new chapters: Montreal, Quebec City, Pointe-aux-Trembles, Beauport, Toronto, Kingston, and Niagara Falls. On March 28 of the same year, a massive investigation by Canadian authorities dubbed Operation Springtime was launched against the Hells Angels. The raids resulted in the arrests of 138 members of the Hells Angels, including Maurice Boucher himself and associates connected with the motorcycle club. This brought about a power vacuum in the country's narcotics market. The Bandidos Canada were looking to take advantage of this opportunity to regain territory lost and take new territory from the Hells Angels. However, a concurrent investigation, Operation Amigo, was underway targeting the Bandidos Canada operations. This operation had initially gone under a different title and was created to target the Rock Machine as a result of the conflict in Quebec. When the Rock Machine patched over to the Bandidos, they became the main focus. On the 5th of June 2002, raids led to the arrests of 62 members of the Bandidos Canada, Rock Machine, including all of its Quebec manpower and many other associates. This put an end to the conflict, as it was the first time since the start of the war that both sides had large numbers of men and their respective leaders in custody and facing charges. All in all, it is the deadliest recorded biker conflict in history, with over 162 dead, over 300 wounded, 100 plus arrested, and 20 people missing. It also cost the government of Canada and Quebec millions of dollars in damages, with 84 bombings and 130 cases of arson.